Hello. Today I'm joined by Bethany Rogers, who is one of 5 candidates running for 3 seats in the Plymouth School Committee race. Welcome, Bethany.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. We're going to get right into the questions. So question number 1 starts with a statement. The $119 million budget that passed at town meeting will fund the department at the current level. It does not include pay raises that are being negotiated with school unions, and more will be requested in the fall. Question is, how do you determine your budgetary priorities given the mandates that you have no control over, the undetermined pay raises, and the state funding, which has not yet been finalized?
So I think one of the things that I think is important is creativity. And I think there are obviously things that are mandated. We have to get our students to school. We have to do certain things. There's students that are moved out of district that we have to transport. I understand that transportation is a big part of our budget. I think there's ways that we need to be creative with that. A prime example that rings true to me because I live on Bartlett Road is the bridge that is currently being repaired by the town will help alleviate some of our transportation costs, where we were busing 4 separate buses to each end of that road because they couldn't get through off of that road. So I think there's ways that as a community, both the town side and the schools need to work together to help alleviate some of that cost. I recognize people aren't going to be particularly excited when school committee comes back in the fall to ask for more money for our CBA and for our collective bargaining agreement. I think the answer to that is that if taxes are raised, we need to continue to remind our residents that our taxes are not just our schools. They're every other service that people use. There are police department, our fire department, our EMS. We have a great council on aging. They fund that. So I think that that's the answer to that. Oh, more money. But I think we need to keep our teachers. We need to put a priority on keeping good teachers in Plymouth.
Okay. Now you mentioned the town and the school working together. Busing was being one, or transportation was one of the issues. Can you think of other ways that the town and the schools can work together to help alleviate some of that school budget that could actually be an overall budgetary help to the town?
So I think some of the things that I've thought of, and to be completely candid, I don't know how they would work. I like to be a little bit outside the box, but I know that we do have a lot, or I believe we have a lot of somewhat overlap in the positions. So we'll just say maybe custodians and our skilled tradesmen, maybe they work in other areas. They work in the schools, but maybe town hall needs something. I think cross-referencing and like using our staff to the best of our abilities is key. Another thing is I think just open communication and transparency. During the last budget cycle, I was on advisory and finance for the joint budget meeting. I left my position on advisory and finance shortly after that. But I think to me, not having been on school committee or select board, it very much felt there was a lot of animosity. It was kind of town versus school. And I think we need to come together and really think pragmatically about this big budget and what areas we can make either deliberate cuts or what areas we really can't, and be more open and communicate that way. And I think that's my big push, is for people to communicate openly about the budget as a whole.
So do you recommend that when budget season starts, and it actually is never even really over, that both the town and the schools have some kind of a subcommittee that constantly work together on budgeting ideas to consolidate when possible?
I do think that would be helpful because I think what ends up happening is as you said, the budget season never ends. But when we get close to that big joint budget meeting, we get close to approving it at town meeting, it's a lot of scrambling. It's a lot of, prime example, this last budget cycle, school committee wasn't able to meet to discuss their budget due to weather. And then we had the joint budget meeting where that probably should have been pushed back, in my opinion, because school committee didn't even have a chance to meet. So I think having ad hoc committees that are constantly in communication might help that flow of, a level service budget is gonna squeak us by, but we really need more. And then it doesn't feel as though it's a slap to the town, to the select board at the end of the day, when they didn't really know. Like, let's keep that line of communication open to discuss what the schools really need. I think that would be a great use of time.
Okay, excellent. We're going to go on to question number 2. What is your philosophy of special education? And what do you think it means for students to be supported in the least restrictive environment?
I'm a big proponent of special education. I think it's really important. I think that I actually had someone in the town ask me this yesterday. I don't think that learning is one size fits all. I don't think that special education needs to be a specialized classroom. I think it's different for everyone with the least restrictive means. I mean, some students might need to be in a very regimented classroom, and that's okay, but there are some students that might just need a little bit of extra help. I'm a big proponent of learning the student, learning their learning style and moving from there. I understand in a district the size that we have, it's probably not as obtainable, but I think our teachers do a really great job at that, at helping the students get maybe the extra services that they need. Maybe they need extra time after school, things of that nature. I do think for years, the school relied on the fact that it is very expensive to educate our special ed students, which I'm not saying it's not. It is, it's expensive, but I think it's one of the most rewarding things. A lot of those kids come back. They work in our local stores. They're here. They're part of our community. And I think not providing quality special education it really goes against Plymouth as a whole. We are one community, regardless of what other issues or what other help someone might need. So it might be expensive, but I think it's worth it. Every penny that we have to spend.
So after the pandemic, or probably over the last 4 to 5 years, the number of students who have been on special education IEPs or required some level of services has increased dramatically. Obviously, the cost also increases dramatically. Do you think that this is just a pattern that's going to continue, or do you think there's an end to that?
I think, to be honest, I think it's a pattern that's going to continue. I think as society as a whole progresses, people are more willing to admit, like, oh, I'm struggling with this. I need some help. Go to their parents, say, I really need some help. I had a friend who didn't know they were dyslexic until they were in college, and they really advocated for themselves. I think of 504s and IEPs moving in the same direction as mental health. We're talking about it more. People are understanding it more. People are using those services. And again, it might be expensive, but if it's between, passing and failing a student, or a student feeling as though they're successful and can go out into the workforce, I'm all for it. So I do think it's a trend that we're going to continue to see. I understand that people associate it a lot with the pandemic, but I really take it to a level of, I think people across the country, across the world, really took stock in what was important during the pandemic. And I think that's what we're seeing. So maybe I think it's a good thing that people are, using their resources, and parents are advocating for this, and students are recognizing that it's not a me problem. I need some help.
Okay. All right. Question number 3. There are often two very different sides to subject matters that come before the school board. How do you navigate your personal opinions in regards to complex issues?
I spoke last week at the COPE event. It's something I feel very strongly about. While I don't necessarily believe that politics have a place in public education, I do recognize that if elected, I am an elected official, and my personal opinion means less than those that voted me in. I represent the people that voted me in. So while sometimes I might have a strong personal opinion, if my constituency feels a certain way, and the majority of that constituency is vocalizing something, I think as an elected official, it's your duty to follow what your constituency says. Some things, I will be honest, go against my moral character, and I might have to check myself. But I do believe that there's a way to be a little more middle of the ground, but also just follow, what the people want. At the end of the day, as much as I have my own ideas, I don't think they're always right.
Okay, what was the COPE event that you spoke at?
The union event with the teachers and our union workers, put on by Dale Weber, and that was kind of how I opened that. I don't think that my personal opinions. I don't have a vested interest in school committee. I don't work for the schools, obviously, because I'm running. I don't have kids in the school. I just really want to help. and maybe be that gap between parents and educators and kind of help that.
Okay. So let me ask you a question. You'd be one of 5 school committee members, and everybody has a very different background, very different philosophies, different views and viewpoints on a lot of things. So what would you say to be fair with anything that's brought before you? How do you negotiate with the other school committee members? Because you basically have to make decisions that will affect all the students.
I think I do a fair amount of that every day. I'm an attorney by day, so I do a fair amount of negotiating with people who might not agree with what I say. And I stand firmly in the fact that in a good negotiation, no one leaves 100% happy.
Right.
So I think a lot of that negotiation comes from really just sharing your ideas and not being afraid to speak up. I have been on the advisory and finance where sometimes I go in on a matter and I'm really against it. I'm like, I really just don't like the way this sounds. Through speaking with other members during discussion and hearing the presentations, it's all about keeping an open mind. And I have been known to change my thought midway through and then vote, oh, I was strong, I'm going to vote no. After hearing all of the other opinions, listening to the other people on the committee, I'm like, oh, maybe, and I vote yes. So I think it's a lot of not being afraid to talk, but not being afraid to listen. I think a lot of people listen to respond instead of listening to really understand. And I think that's the key, is really taking it in and being willing to hear the other side before you start your rebuttal.
Okay, thank you. So question number 4, what are Plymouth School's greatest strengths? And then we'll talk about what you think they really need improvement in.
I think our greatest strengths are the pride that people that either work or go to Plymouth Public Schools have. And I think that starts with the community. I moved to Plymouth in 5th grade, so I work in Dennis, so I have experience with other school districts. I think the pride that Plymouth Public Schools shares is really strong. I think that starts at the bottom with our teachers really instilling that pride. We have great athletics, which I think helps. There's something for every student. I would say there's a club or a tech or an activity for every student to do. And so I believe that when you're a part of the community in terms of, okay, I'm on the robotics team, or I'm on the field hockey team, you want to represent your team and in turn the community as a whole. So I think our pride for our schools is something that we do really, really well. Something that I think we could work on is hiding behind certain agenda items. I think for years in terms of our budget, we hid behind the cost of educating our special ed students. I think now we're somewhat hiding behind the cost of transportation and saying it's just that expensive. Unfortunately, it costs this amount of money to bus our students, which I understand, but I do think that there are other areas where we could be making either deliberate cuts or just being more creative or being more transparent about things. I understand that for the past couple of years, I've heard that the school committee and Dr. Campbell is working with our state delegation to hopefully get some more funding for transportation. But in the interim, when that's not there, we need to be doing something else. We need to be making either deliberate cuts or deliberate everything that we do, especially in a juncture where people are throwing around the idea of Prop 2.5, needs to be thought through on a systematic level, rather than just saying this is a fixed cost. Yes, it's a fixed cost, but what can we do to make that fixed cost lower?
Okay, so there'll be those who say, well, there's nothing you can do about a fixed cost because, for example, whatever you get per head from the state, you can't change that. So that is a fixed cost. Whatever you have to negotiate for transportation costs, it is a fixed cost. How do you counterpoint that?
So I think, yes, those are the fixed costs, but how can we be creative in order to, so I don't know how much per bus or per student, but we'll just say it's per bus. We're running, we'll just say after school buses at our high school and our middle school on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Is it ideal to have our high school students stay a little bit later? No, but can we run one set of buses for our high school and our middle school late buses instead of running 2? I think that those are ways that we can be creative and cut down costs. I understand that for years, the idea has been we don't want to change the experience for our students, right? So that's not cutting programs. I'm not suggesting that, but I think there are ways that we might have to change the experience for our students. Busing, maybe some of our middle school sports, I'm not saying cut them, but offer them at different times in order to save money. I'm working on buying a house. I'm a big proponent of like those pennies add up. And so we need to cut some pennies where we can. Again, I don't know if that's practical, but I think just having that conversation and maybe someone says, that's not going to work because we need to operate X, Y, and Z. And I'm fine with that. I just think being more open instead of saying, this is a fixed cost. Well, what can we do to make that fixed cost even just a little bit lower?
Okay. And you said that students have so many choices as far as clubs, committees, things that they can be on, things that they can be interested in. Do all those things, and you're right, Plymouth is unusual in how many varied programs are offered to its students. What about the cost of all of that and offering all of that?
So that's kind of what I was alluding to in the fact that I don't know in the last couple of years how our enrollment is, and we'll use sports as an example. I played sports in high school, so I don't know what our enrollment is in sports, but I do think in terms of offering sports at the middle school level, it's great, but we also offer it at the town level. So maybe we have our middle school students play up onto our freshman teams, and we're able to fill those freshman teams out a little bit more. We're not running 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 buses for different basketball programs. We can try and fill that out. I think that's places where we have to be deliberate, right? We're not trying to change the experience. We're trying to offer it in a different way. It's still offered through the town, things of that nature. So I think it's great that we offer everything, but I think we might need to take a little bit of stock in how much that service is being used, for example.
Okay.
How many are engaged in it?
Okay.
Kind of thing.
All right. So the plus is the pride that people have in their community, and the minuses would be the funding and how to better coordinate or look at the funding.
I think it's the funding, but I also think it's the communication. Let's stop just focusing on this one thing and see how we can, because we hear it from town members all the time, oh, they say that busing's so expensive, but like, why do I see, 3 kids on a bus? And maybe there's a reason for that. And so I think instead of just putting up a wall and standing behind, this is this expensive and we can't get around it, like a little bit more communication, a little more creativity, rather than just relying on it being a fixed cost.
Okay. And you're going to have 2 minutes now to make a closing statement and talk to the constituents and tell them why they should be voting for you for school committee. Whenever you're ready, go right ahead.
So as I said earlier, I really believe that as an elected official, my job is to represent my constituents and to really be that bridge between education and the constituents. I'm very open. I'm very honest. I don't believe that politics has a place in education, which I had to take stock in because now I am running a campaign and I had to realize that I'm doing that. And the reason for that is I think that every student deserves an education and the best education we can give them. I understand there's a lot of worry about taxes and the budget and our teachers' pay and transportation, and those are all things that I can't wait to get to and hope that I'm able to get to. But I really am just a voice for everyone else. I do that every day in my regular job. I'm an advocate, and that's what I'd like to be for the town of Plymouth on school committee. I think we need a little bit of change. I think we need some creativity, and I think we need someone to shake things up a little bit. I'm excited to shake those things up. I am proud to be from Plymouth. Graduated 10 years ago. Thought I was going to be a teacher. I'm not a teacher, but hopefully I can help support them now. So I encourage everyone to get out and vote, encourage everyone to listen to every candidate, a big fan of informed voting, and I hope to be your elected official soon.
Okay, thank you, Bethany, very much. We wish you the best luck during the campaign and in the election season. And please make your voices heard by voting on or before May 18th in the Plymouth Town election. Thank you and good day.